So I'm actually going to start out with a task for all of you, instead of you guys. Close your eyes and picture a field. Now give it some white chalk lines and level it. That's your level playing field. Okay, open your eyes. Look at your bench. Who's on it? How many people in the room have a bench of the exact same player? Good. How many of you have players that have very different skill sets, backgrounds, capabilities to bring to the field? That should be everyone, because nobody else raised their hands for the other one. Okay, cool. So I have a very similar take on the marketplace, and we got to discuss this before we came here today, which was a great conversation. You're going to hear some of it. But I actually think that bench is even more diverse because of where those players are coming from and what their background is, right? You have got maybe a polo player on a horse with a stick. You've got a stick, is that what it is? I don't know. You've got a football player, you've got a soccer player, you've got a rugby player, right? They're all very different, not just in the game they're playing, but the goals of those games. And so you've got a behemoth search engine like Google that has launched Shopper and has taken its users and all the information it has to be a walled garden and say, we now have a bidding platform as well. Not new, but they've done it. You've also got this social network that was born from a digital yearbook that now is influencing elections and changing the way we talk to each other and communicate. You've got all of these big, robust players, including, we see Oath over there, a Verizon company. Verizon, a telecom company, is now in this space. Maybe they're the polo player, I don't know. But they also are what I would classify as a walled garden. And then last but not least is this humble giant bookstore from Seattle that now owns publishing and Whole Foods. So how did we get there? Sailing the Amazon. That's the talk today. Sailing the Amazon. That's Steve. We got to talk about that name next time, though. But anyway, so let's get into it. With me, I have Jake, Megan, and Arielle, and each of them had a reason for being here today, much like myself. So I'll start to my left with Jake. Why did you say yes to this?
Yeah, so I guess a quick answer is the data. So in a world where first-party data has become very popular now, it's all about what makes their data more interesting and unique. So for Amazon, they have all this purchase and intent data, whereas other first-party data is more like interested in. And I just think the mindset of users on Amazon is just so unique to them, and not many other partners have that data on these users.
Megan?
Same question?
Same question.
Yeah, figured. So I completely agree. I think the data part of Amazon is crazy powerful. But I think why I said yes to this is because for marketers, this is not something that is a next month or next year or next quarter thing to include in your plan. You need to be using Amazon right now. We cannot always just rely on the same old. And if you're not thinking about Amazon in some capacity, you're going to be missing a lot of opportunities.
Okay, one more time, same question. Why are you here?
Yeah, to kind of echo what Megan said, I totally agree. If you're not on Amazon, it is a missed opportunity on so many levels. And personally, from a brand perspective, our presence and programs on Amazon have been, I would say, a huge component of our brand's growth over the past year and a half.
I love that levels part, because so often I think Amazon is considered to be this low funnel, last touch, come buy stuff from us type of play, but I'm not sure that that's where you guys are getting the best value or all of your value. So where does Amazon sit in your, this is where we're going to tackle the funnel?
Yeah, so from the brand side, when we approach Amazon, our perspective has kind of changed. And we're still testing to shift where that is exactly. While the consumers on Amazon itself are in more of a converting mindset, we know that 26% of retail searches begin on Amazon, which is more than through a search engine like Google. So just by virtue of not being on Amazon, we are missing a higher income, more likely to convert consumer. So we have to consider that when we develop our awareness initiatives. We have to make sure that we're accounting for this consumer that is on the Amazon space.
What do you guys think? Is that same for you? Like, there's upper funnel here?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it kind of depends what you're using Amazon for, because if we're talking AMS and selling on Amazon, I still think they dominate the mid to bottom funnel space. They are just like amazing at it. But Amazon has gotten really great at upper funnel too, with the introduction and using AAP. So it is completely full funnel, and the data that they have allows it to be full funnel. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess coming from someone who's never worked on a CPG brand or anyone, I guess, that sells a product on Amazon, I think AAP has definitely made it more of a top funnel play for anyone who doesn't have a product on Amazon now. So AAP, just because of the data they have, as we mentioned a few times, just makes it all funnel streams now.
Okay, so definitely awareness, not so sure, definitely mid to low, some awareness, and awareness, no doubt. So we've got a varied opinion on how good Amazon is to attach themselves to those different goals you might have. I would agree, which for those paying attention means doesn't matter what I just said, because those are three different opinions. But I think you all have a good one and the right to have that opinion. So if it's not just lower funnel, though, which we definitely all agree on, how does that have to affect your planning process? And when I'm thinking planning, I'm thinking from an audience-first strategy to an inventory, an activation strategy. How do you go to market thinking, oh, wait, Amazon should play in this space too. They're going to have an impact on what I'm doing.
All right, I guess I'll start. So I guess coming from someone who doesn't have a brand on Amazon, I guess our messaging is the same throughout, even if we're on Amazon or on the open exchange through AAP. So for us, for Amazon, the reason why we use them is just purely because of their audience. So even though we have different DSPs that we use, the Strategist is our preferred one. The reason why we use Amazon is because you can only use their data through their platform, and because you only buy Amazon data through AAP. So that's like a unique reason why you would use them.
Yeah, and for us, I mean, we kind of skirt the line, I guess. We have clients that are like Mustela that are on Amazon and selling on Amazon, and then clients who do not. And for us, if you are one of our clients that is selling on Amazon, that means for us moving dollars from Google, from Facebook, from some of those like huge players to Amazon in a very big, real way. And if they're not, you know, I think the biggest, it doesn't change our process that much, because we're probably like you, where what we're looking for is intent-driven users, right? We want people who are showing some type of intent that they're going to purchase one of our clients' products or take some type of action. And now Amazon is just coming in to say, hey, we have this intent bucket too. So maybe it is just moving money from another strategy to Amazon to use some of their audiences a little bit better. So a little bit of a pivot, but it doesn't like completely disrupt anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, and maybe it's our brand in particular, but my team and I were pretty nimble when it comes to developing media programs, and for us it's just kind of assessing that this is something that needs to be in the equation. Amazon isn't always the easiest partner to work with, but
no.
I know, shocking. But just again, by virtue of needing to touch that part of the consumer audience, we just need to consider it in the ecosystem when we're developing media plans.
So how about beyond media? I think we're all too often tasked with a KPI first, and then you kind of back into how that relates to ultimate goals. But if we plan for these outcomes of business needs to do X, Y, and Z, marketing, your role is this, media within marketing, it's this, how do you then align back a measurement strategy, I should say, that supports thinking about Amazon early?
Measurement strategy. Again, I think that it really depends, just like how we look at all of our initiatives, either if they're on Google or Facebook from a KPI perspective. I think we really try to assess what the goal is and use that. That in and of itself shouldn't change. I mean, if you're objective is acquisition, then we need to look at a different KPI than if it's conversion. So I don't think that changes necessarily. I think that our expectation of what we're going to get out of Amazon in terms of the consumer behavior is maybe a little bit different than if we have a program with a publisher or a program with Google, with Facebook. But I do not think that in terms of measuring the KPIs that anything changes too much.
Okay, you said it. You said Google and Facebook, so we got to talk about them. The duopoly. We've seen it. I know Steve mentioned it earlier. I think Ashley, if you're still in the room, had talked about it briefly. But is the duopoly dead? I have my opinion, and you probably all followed my analogy this morning and I think it might be, but where is the duopoly going? Is Amazon the new player on the field to get its goals done?
I personally wouldn't say that the duopoly is dead. I mean, I think that there's still a huge value in Facebook and in Google. Personally, for a smaller brand, we do have a lot more flexibility in those channels. And I still think that Facebook in particular, their targeting and the way that we're able to reach consumers is very interesting. But that being said, I think that Amazon has become a force that we just can't ignore from a marketer's perspective. If you're not on Amazon, it's a miss in revenue. If you're a brand and you're not controlling your voice on Amazon, it's a miss in brand awareness. And if you're not participating in the programs in Amazon, which are currently not as saturated as Facebook and Google, then it's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree and disagree, I guess, at the same time, because I think if you are selling on Amazon, it is now, those are your three players. It is Amazon, it is Google, and it's Facebook, and it's probably Amazon first, like RIP, duopoly, right? But if we're talking about selling off of Amazon, if we're talking about more of a traditional brand, I don't know if it is dead, because Amazon is great because they have a lot of inventory and they have a lot of data, which is awesome, and so do Facebook and Google, and that's what makes them such a force. But I think that they're a leader in the DSPs, and I think they're doing awesome things, and I think they're closest, but I don't think they're there yet. If you're not selling on Amazon, it is you should be, but it's not like oh dear God, what are you doing? You know, like if you're not advertising on Google or Facebook.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I guess just to reiterate what she just said. So I do think it is Facebook and Google still, but when you think about all three of these companies, you think about the scale and inventory. It's all unique to them, and no one else has that data. So even though like Amazon is still pretty new, AAP is growing, and you kind of see it in like the data that they're getting more revenue going to Amazon now compared to, again, taken out of Facebook and Google. So I think since they're still new, they still have a lot of room to grow. I think it will start to creep up more and more that Amazon starts to take away share of media spend from Facebook and Google.
So this is a panel on Amazon, so we should focus there, but what about the others, right? So there are certainly other large players, whether they're independent or not, that have other offerings. And when I look for a platform to onboard or a partner to use, the main goal that we come across is, what do you have that's unique? Do you have unique data? Do you have unique user access? Do you have unique inventory, capabilities, placements? Like, what is it that you have that nobody else has? And that seems to be the highlight so far on why Amazon, why Google, why Facebook. But what about some of the others, and are they helping to do some of that disruption? I hate that word.
I mean, I guess the only one that you can really think of that is kind of on that playing field, but not as much, is Oath, because they do have Verizon data. I think that acquisition and just having the Bright Roll DSP just makes it a little bit more unique to them and a new selling point to use that DSP and to use Oath.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on Oath. And I also think most good DSPs have something that is unique. And while Amazon has kind of become this leader, I don't think, and we still use multiple other organizations because they all have something to offer. Because like I said, for us, it's about, how do we find users who have intent? How do we ultimately get somebody to purchase a product or take some type of action. And while Amazon has really great data and really great inventory, most of the other DSPs have something that they're bringing to the table too that maybe Amazon does not have. So it is still a very multi kind of like DSP world for us.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with that from the way our brand operates. I think that the way that we found success is not putting all of our spend in one bucket. The way to really kind of be profitable when how you reach the consumer is to look at everything at what they bring to the table and to plan a strategy around all of that.
Got it. Okay, I'm on board. Definitely on board.
You buy in?
Yeah, I buy in. So Arielle's outnumbered up here. 3 agency people versus 1 brand person. There is a different time for each of us to talk about Amazon. And I feel like maybe your situation is the most unique because your product is actually sold through Amazon. Whereas for us, it is, I have clients that sell insurance. I have clients that don't sell any hard products. How do each of you, I guess, as well, find the time and think of the right time to say Amazon needs to be in this discussion?
For us as a company, it's kind of happened somewhat naturally. I think until about a year and a half ago, Amazon was just this thing that was providing revenue, but we've really taken a look at what's going on there, and we're seeing huge growth, not only in terms of revenue, but in general, our brand awareness and the type of things that are going on there. Our Prime demographic is very similar to Amazon Prime's demographic, and I think that a lot of consumer products, that's the core audience they want to reach. So it's if you're a brand where your core demographic aligns with Amazon Prime, the majority, I think it's critical to be having this sort of a conversation because you're leaving revenue and awareness opportunity on the table.
Yeah, and if it's about selling on Amazon, I don't know if there's ever like the right time, right? Like it is an undertaking. And hey, do you have nothing else to do today? I don't think any of us could answer like, yeah, like I have nothing else, right? Like you have to balance what you're doing in e-com for a lot of our clients, and then also introduce Amazon, make decisions on how you want to partner with Amazon, and then how you want to advertise on Amazon. I think if you're talking about more of a traditional brand, that's an easier conversation because it's not as big of a undertaking, and you can really have that conversation if you're an agency with any of your clients or with your agency, really at any point, because this is something that, again, I think you should be doing already, but if you're finding some challenges with finding the right audience, especially from a buyer side, I think you can do it at any point. But yeah, if you're trying to sell, like...
Yeah, there's... Yeah, one point that I probably should have spoken about that you sort of touched on is that difference between selling on your own e-commerce site and with Amazon. I think that is a discussion that's really been at the forefront of the way that we approach things. We do have our own e-commerce site, which I do run, and it's always that kind of fine balance where we know if we're not sending the consumer to our own site and we're sending them to Amazon, we're really missing a lot of the touch point and the way that we're going to be able to communicate with the consumer at a later point. So again, it kind of goes back to that approach and how we fit it into the ecosystem is looking at Amazon and the abilities that we're able to do there as not a completely separate segment, but just kind of a different audience in the way that we're reaching them.
So I have another question for the audience. Who thinks display advertising works?
Oh my God, I'd hope there'd be more hands. Do they know where we are?
I got to ask that again a different way. Who thinks display advertising doesn't work?
What are you defining as display?
Squares, rectangles. Non-video. Non-video is my real.
Rectangles, I would probably raise my hand for.
Yeah. Okay. And non-dynamic, right? I think dynamic has its own special place in display. So when I think of Amazon, I don't necessarily think of a very strong video play. And I don't necessarily think of a very strong mobile play. But they feel like they're positioned to win in their own right. Do you guys agree? And if so, where are they positioned to win and why?
I totally agree. I think they are an audience, like purely like that's why I love them. The data is why I love them. And if they didn't have the audiences and they didn't have that data, like I don't know. I mean, they have some exclusive inventory and that's cool and all, but like really the audience play for me is the big Amazon thing, and I think that's where they're gonna really excel. I mean, it's kind of like who knows what they're gonna do tomorrow, but as of right now, that's what it seems.
Jake, the tacticianer.
Yeah, I mean, I would have the same opinions as Megan, but I mean, it doesn't really matter if they're going to, I guess, video or mobile. It just gives them more scale. It's just all about the inventory, like she said. Like, if they didn't have inventory, why would you use them? They'd be the same as every other DSP out there, so.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done too much with Amazon by way of video for a reason. Who knows where the product is going to move? I think that they've really improved a lot of their other offerings over the past year. And they're definitely trying to strike against the duopoly, but I agree for now it's definitely an audience play.
So I would agree that they're not stagnant by any means. I think every time I talk to an Amazon rep or someone, they say this is new and this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I wonder what the next iteration of Amazon looks like and how they navigate their future to continue to play in this space. I could read some tea leaves and take some guesses, and I think they'll probably leverage some of that outside data. But what about offline? I mean, Whole Foods, what doesn't? By the way, PepsiCo is a client of mine. Whole Foods does not sell PepsiCo products. So how does this affect each of you?
So maybe I'll start. I do think they're probably going to get more integrated with like the Whole Foods and the streaming stuff. They have to. They have all this information, and they do a little bit, but I don't think it's there yet. But I think for Amazon, where they're going to have to go as advertising just becomes a bigger portion of their overall business is they're going to follow the same footsteps that Google and Facebook had to follow, right? They're going to need a better UX. They're going to need better customer service. And I'd also like to see a little bit more innovation from them. I know they're always doing something new, but there are some things that really are missing the mark, like viewability, transparency, like attribution between AMS and AAP, like those things are not there. And for me, that seems like a very simple place to add value to marketers. And I'd really love if they could continue to innovate, not just for the ad placements, but what's available for us as far as like optimization, improving lift and all of that.
You brought up attribution and lift, so I'm going to double down on that question. How do you maintain, since it's audience first, right? Amazon has audiences, and if audience is the first thing and the number one priority to working with a brand like Amazon, how do you then make sure that that audience is receiving a connected message or a story as they interact with your brand, either through Amazon or through Facebook or through search or elsewhere, billboards?
All right. I mean, as someone who doesn't have a client that has a product on Amazon, I guess our messaging doesn't really change from on Amazon versus off Amazon. So it's just really just getting our ads out in front of those users just because we think they're more qualified and that audience is more credible than a different audience out there.
Yeah, aside from, I would say the way that we communicate with consumers and what they see doesn't differ too much across channels because we're able to really control that. I think the only thing that really changes is when Amazon has particular requirements in terms of what's being put on the ads for AMG and AMS. And then also, we found that sometimes our approach to SEO is a little bit different on Amazon, which could result in maybe some different communication, different ways of titling our products or advertising them. But we try to kind of keep everything as cohesive as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And the major change that we see, because it is just an omni-channel, right? And we're looking at Amazon as just part of that, one of those channels. But the major difference that we'll see sometimes, not always, is that if a client is selling on Amazon, there might be best-selling products on Amazon that differ from the e-com site. So we might have to pivot a little bit on, just because the demographic of Amazon that you touched upon, we might have to pivot on like what products maybe we're promoting or what products we're offering, like discounts, if that makes sense, or recommended products or suggested products versus if we're talking about a traditional like send to e-com store. So that is a conversation that we're always having with brands. I don't know if you see the same thing.
Yeah, so one thing that I think early on in our Amazon conversations with senior management, there was some concern about the overlap, and maybe you're pulling away from in-store and you're pulling away from e-com. But when we look at our best-selling SKUs across our owned e-commerce site, across Amazon, and across what sells in-store, they're completely different. So it's really more of an opportunity where you're able to manipulate the things that maybe aren't doing as well in store. You're able to push certain things. It's just more, it makes the products that you're selling more of a varying ecosystem.
So my ecosystem is strictly digital, and some addressable TV, which is like, where does that really live? It's certainly not out of home, and it's not print. But when I think about the world that I do live in and I help contribute to, I'm just struggling with the likes of Amazon or a DSP of any name, or a direct buy or an IO buy. And the last conversation we had up here about bringing programmatic or display in-house, I thought was really interesting to think, okay, how do I then control frequency? Because it has to matter. Because if I see an ad 100 times and I convert, okay, that doesn't mean that's the right frequency cap. But if I see it 100 or 200, there has to be a difference there, especially when that ultimately means twice the cost. So is there an approach that you're starting to think about? Because I don't know if anybody has a solution. If anyone in the room has a solution, stand up on top of the table and let us know what it is. I'm all ears. Everyone's still sitting, so nobody out there. How about you guys?
Yeah, I would love to know what you guys have to say about this, but at least from our perspective, I think that this is one of those areas where we're still kind of figuring out how to have a better understanding of what that sweet spot is, and also that information from Amazon is sometimes difficult to get.
Yeah, I guess you have to look at this, like, I guess, bigger picture and just go from, I guess, top of the funnel to low funnel. It's like, what's the average frequency for someone to convert? I guess that's what you look at first. And then if you have a DMP, then you can put like a global frequency on that. But I don't know if I would have one just specifically for Amazon.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm thinking global frequency at a user level, right? Yeah. Okay. So,
I have a question about basic ad experience in Amazon, because as a user, I'm a little befuddled by it. I'm finding that, you know, I'm looking for a specific history book, and I'm on that history page, and I'm getting a progressive ad, and I'm not entirely sure I understand the logic of the placement, whether targeting is being used at all, what the advertiser is expecting to gain from that. I don't have a full understanding yet, even as a user, but also someone who's sort of working and writing about the industry. What is the logic behind some of the brand advertising that is popping up on these Amazon pages? I'm not in the market at all for that particular product. It's there anyway. Is that just poor targeting on their part? Is it poor data that Amazon is really providing? Bad promises about what is actually going on that page and what mindset I'm in?
yeah, I think that's a really great question, because when we think about data and activation and that being what we're almost commingling as the term for audience, There's the third-party stuff that's out there that's publisher, put my tag on your site, you're ESPN, this is a sports enthusiast, right? We moved to the likes of Amazon because they have that much richer data on a one-to-one user basis, and they say this person is likely to shop for these things. I went on there the other day, and it knew which vehicle I had, and I didn't tell it which vehicle I had, year, make, and model. And it kind of blew my mind how quickly they were able to figure those things out. But that may be part of the problem, because I don't know how they're building out those data sets. Mm-hmm. There's still a lack of transparency, even though there's a lot of really strong information there. I'm not the one curating what that audience looks like. I'm not the one saying, I want to show a Gatorade ad to anyone who has bought Nike shoes and sports drinks in general, or cases of water. Create that segment for me. It doesn't quite work that way. So I would bet that there's probably just a bit of a mix on which segments you're falling into from Progressive, which, come on.
Well, I'm also curious how ultimately, the user comes to expect a certain coherence and targeting to the Amazon page. We've been doing this for years. We know what that environment's like. We know the feel of it. And irrelevant ads in that environment actually stand out in a negative way, I think, more than in other environments, because our set of expectations are different here. And I'm curious. I find myself as a user and as a critic in the industry wondering what the logic is behind the advertisers who are in that space, what mindset they think they're tapping into. If they're not targeting precisely for a specific set of intent or need, then what do they think they're getting out of it?
I naturally have an opinion on this, but I don't want to just be done.
I would say that it's not. At least our approach to Amazon, we are trying to target a specific intent or need. I think that sometimes Amazon is still developing and they've missed the mark. I know that we've had media programs where, again, because we're not developing that exact audience, sometimes they don't deliver. And then there are other times where the data really does deliver and where we are definitely reaching that correct consumer. And I think that it's sometimes that Amazon misses the mark, and unfortunately, we really need to continue to test and to play in that space, because if you don't, you're missing out. So I think it's from them, the way that they're going to need to evolve as a service provider. They're going to need to be a bit more transparent, and they're going to need to be sharing a bit more with brands in order to kind of compete against Facebook and Google, where we have a lot more visibility into where we're being shown.
Yeah, but I guess you can really say that about like any data partner, like any third party. It's like you don't have any transparency into any of that stuff. So it's kind of like giving blind faith to them and hoping that what you actually want or what that segment is actually true, and they actually fall into that, cut into that box. So even though we want to, it's just like a lot of it is just blind faith, because we can't really dig into each user. So it's kind of hard to just tell.
I have this theory of the publisher pendulum, where for a while it was audience by proxy. They're reading this content, they're great for you. And then we had this massive swing where it went all to, through the network land and into DSPs and all audience targeting. It didn't matter where they were, what they were consuming, as long as they were the right person and it was the right time, and oh yeah, right place kind of starts to matter again. So we're swinging back towards publishers having some of that ownership, and Amazon's a publisher. So you're going to find sometimes it just doesn't disconnect, and proxy doesn't work.
Well, let's see if we have any questions. Anybody else has any questions? The panel.
Hi, Ashley from Cicerone.
Ashley.
So I've been reading a book called The Four. Actually, I'm not going to lie, I'm not reading an audiobook. About the four, and what was noted in that book was that essentially e-commerce is going to die and that Amazon will take over because retailers really can't compete on the shipping. I know Amazon actually loses like something ridiculous like $5 billion a year on shipping. So they're setting these expectations for regular e-commerce to deliver within 1 to 2 day window. So it's really putting a strain on these e-commerce sites to deliver, because now you've changed the mentality of the consumer. We actually had a client of ours that was a small retailer actually drop out of the e-commerce space because it was more cost effective, efficient to go to Amazon than rather standing up an e-commerce site, pay for the shipping, pay for advertising. So my question to Arielle is, do you find Amazon to be more cost efficient to run than standing up an e-commerce site with those points?
Not necessarily. I mean, in some ways, just the base revenue, yes, it is more profitable, but we're also losing that margin. And then to invest in some of those programs, I mean, in order to really maximize what you can do on Amazon, you need to be investing in those other programs. I also think that when it comes to how our e-commerce site has developed over the last couple of years, we're seeing growth still. And I do think that it's not great for a brand to pull out of that because, as I mentioned earlier, you still have consumers that are approaching retail in a different mindset. So even if Amazon completely takes over the majority of the e-commerce space, you're still going to have consumers who are repeat purchasers or who are looking to a brand or another specific retailer for a certain experience, for a certain product. So again, it's the way that I like to look at the digital ecosystem is I want to be wherever my consumer is. I don't want to be pulling back or pulling out from any sort of potential touch point. So yeah, I'm familiar with that book, and I think it is a super interesting concept, and who knows, Amazon might rule us all at one point. But I definitely think that there are still ways to run a profitable, growing e-commerce business in conjunction with what you're doing on Amazon.
We have another one over here.
Hi, I'm Tishan from Uber. I manage our DMP. Luke, you mentioned earlier that display is dead. Can you elaborate?
I didn't say it was dead. I said it might not work, at least not with the intent that we need. When we launch any display campaigns, usually we try and make that creative as lively as possible and unique and as customizable as possible. And we're getting as far away from the here is a blank red, blue, or orange banner that says hi, right? I just think that that's a miss with the capabilities that currently exist even in a display atmosphere. There's a lot more that can be done than to simply put out something static because we've got blinders on. It is really hard to see a basic display ad and say, oh, that's an introduction to a brand that I want to know. I just think we owe it to our brands, and if we are brands, we owe it to our consumers and customers to give them a better relationship and tell them a better story, and I'm just not sure plain display can do that.
We are going to continue this in the roundtable that's going to start right now. So Luke and panel, thanks very much.